Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay and see my screen? Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm really excited about this meeting, our network meeting today, because I know it's a concern for a lot of people in the county. Please do introduce yourself in the chat and change your display name with your first name and your organization name. And also just by way of icebreaker, if there are concerns that you're hearing from your learners or community members that you're working with about rent increases or housing, please, and you feel comfortable, please do share those in the chat. And with that, I'm going to welcome Kathy to offer some opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kathy Stevens. For those of you who I don't know, I am the executive director at MCAEL. And it's always wonderful to see you all, whether in person or on screen. And thank you for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. I know that very often when we do these network meetings, we want to talk about and address issues that are of relevance to your organizations. And of course, most particularly your ESOL learners. What else do they have going on in their lives? Because we all know with all the different pressures in the world, being able to be present and be in a classroom or in an online class and learn, there are all these other things that our colleagues, our learners are dealing with. So this is a very timely discussion, and we appreciate, Halima will do all the introduction of the panelists, but we really appreciate the variety of panelists we have here. And I recently had the opportunity to attend, and some of you all may have been there as well. Kojo Namdi did a Kojo in Your Neighborhood event around housing, rental housing, rent issues, that kind of thing. And it just always strikes me. I have a friend who's in the healthcare industry who says housing is healthcare. You know, if someone has stable, affordable housing, they can do the things they need in their life to remain healthy, both physically and mentally and emotionally. And I think for our learners, thinking about what housing means to them in terms of their ability to stabilize their lives, get to work on time, get children to school, and knowing that they have affordable, continuous housing is, of course, of utmost importance to them. And that discussion at the Kojo show, and I'm sure it's recorded on NPR or WAMU, you can get to it. There was a lot of discussion around how do we manage increasing housing costs and how do we look at them, particularly right at the moment when we've been through the pandemic period in our county where rent increases were on a moratorium. There were no rent increases for the past couple of years. And now that's been lifted. And we certainly can see from a business point of view, landlords who can increase rents now because they've lost revenue, they need to keep up with the inflationary costs they have. And yet at the same time, how do we protect and preserve housing for people who may be not able to weather huge increases? And how do we look at these things, educate our learners about what their rights, what their opportunities are through a variety of certainly nonprofits and county offices, and how do we assist them in understanding how they can navigate these, tense and nerve-wracking waters of faced with a big rent increase. What are they going to do, and how can they maintain their housing where they want to live and under what circumstances? So I think it's a very, very timely discussion, and one that really wraps around the service of getting to English class. Because if you've got these stressors and you're going to have to move, what are things that you're going to take off your plate? Certainly your ongoing education might be one of those. So happy to have you all here. We have a great panel lined up, and I hope everyone is continuing to stay connected with MCAEL, getting our newsletters, signed up and following us on social media, and being in touch through the Google group. And we're about to publish this year's version of our print class directory. How many people are familiar with the class directory? Just a little hands up there. Good. making sure that you access that online and in the print form if you need to refer learners. And of course, any questions can come to our staff here at MCAEL. So I just want to thank Halima. This is Halima's last meeting with us. I think some of you know she's moving on to a great new opportunity. So just another public acknowledgement of how much we're going to miss Halima and how much we wish her well. And she's got great new challenges to go on to. So with that, Halima, I turn it back to you in this great discussion we're going to have on rental issues, and how those affect our learners, what resources we can offer to them. And honestly, it may not just be learners, right? It may be people with whom we're working or coming into other contact with. So thank you all for being here. I will be on for a little bit, and then I'm going to need to go to some other meetings.
Thank you, Kathy. I know that this is a topic that has been coming up in a lot of circles that I'm in. Actually, we are hearing it from a lot of people. I'm going through it myself. I've seen a double digit with my rental increase. And the reason why we wanted to have this meeting is so that you're connected with the different resources that are in the county directly. So you can hear about what are the options that people have, what are their rights, and also just understanding what does the eviction process look like and what are the rights of people within that process. We have a full agenda today. Each speaker is going to get about 15 minutes. I invite you all to introduce yourself again. We'll have question and answers at the end. So please hold on to your questions, or you can put them in the chat. And with that, I will invite Valerie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Valerie Whitby. I'm an investigator with the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs, which is a section within the Department of Housing and Community Affairs within Montgomery County government. My role here today is to give you a general overview of landlord and tenant rights. So some of this does cross into the landlord spectrum, but specifically focusing on the rent increase issue that so many people are facing right now, as well as with the eviction process. I'm not going to go too deeply into that because there are some other organizations here that are going to speak in that in more detail. But as Halima stated, if there's any questions that you have, feel free to message me in the chat directly or in the group, whichever you're more comfortable with. I did put my contact information in the chat as well. So generally, the Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs is charged with informing the public of their general rights and responsibilities of the tenants and landlords that reside here in the county, and we help to resolve issues amicably without any charge and without having to go through the district court process. There are times when a complaining party or the responding party may need to go to district court, but we try to avoid those if we can. I'm just going to jump right into the issue with the rent increases. I do want to make one correction to something Kathy had mentioned. During the pandemic, rent increases were allowable. It was just a matter of how much. There was a cap on the amount, and that cap was tied to the voluntary rent guideline. The voluntary rent guideline is issued every year, generally in February, by the county executive. And so what the county council did was tie that cap to whatever the number was for that year. So for example, in 2020, it was 2.6%. So your landlord could increase your rent, but no more than that 2.6%. 2021 was 1.4%, and currently it's 0.4%. And however, that emergency legislation is exactly what it was, an emergency. And that legislation sunset, it ended and expired on May 15th of this year. So any rent increase notices after that date was not required to adhere to that guideline. So essentially, everything reverted back to the way it was prior to April of 2020. The voluntary rent guideline has been in place in this county for almost 40 years, I think since 1983. And so the issue is that now you're seeing landlords who were held to that cap are now starting to issue rent increases much higher than tenants have ever seen before, and much higher than some of them have ever given before. There's a lot of moving parts to why that is, but ultimately the why doesn't matter. What matters is the impact that it's having on residents and the decisions that they're having to make to decide, can I stay here? Can I afford to stay here? Or what can I do and where can I go if the answer to that question, I cannot afford to stay here? So there are a few things when it comes to getting a rent increase. So Halima, if you don't mind, I may use you as an example. But when you receive a rent increase, it's important to understand that there are requirements that the law states your landlord must include in your rent increase. The also Landlord Tenant Affairs does publish a landlord tenant handbook. I think around page 14 or so, it may just, or 21, there's an entire section on rent increases. We encourage tenants who receive rent increases to make sure that they're compliant with county law. And so take your rent increase and compare it with that section in the handbook and make sure that your notice is in writing, that it was given to you at least 90 days before the effective date of your rent increase. It has to include what your current rent is, so the amount you are currently paying every month. It has to include what the new rent amount is going to be, what that percentage is. It has to include whatever the current voluntary rent guideline is. Even though the landlord doesn't have to adhere to the guideline, it still has to tell you, that notice has to tell you what that guideline is. And it also must include a statement informing a tenant that they may ask my department to review any increase that they deem to be excessive. Also, your landlord cannot issue you a rent increase more than once in a 12-month period. And it also means that your notice has to correspond with the rent payment cycle. What that means is that if your landlord issues you a rent increase any day after the first of the month, then essentially it means that they now have, it will extend the amount of time. So let me give an example. January 1st, you get a rent increase notice. It has to cover all of January, all of February, all of March. April 1st is when that new amount goes into effect. But if your landlord issues you a notice on January 2nd or after, that new amount wouldn't go into effect until May 1st. You have to have that full 90 days. So again, we encourage tenants that have received rent increases to please review them. And if they have questions, to submit a complaint to our office. Full disclosure, there are limits to what our office can do. If your landlord issued a notice to you that is not faulty, meaning it complies with all the different things that the notice must comply with the law, but you still believe it to be excessive, we are strongly encouraging residents to file a complaint with our office. Let us take a look at that rent increase notice. We are happy to try to mediate or negotiate a lower or an extended rate on your behalf. We just can't make any guarantees because, again, there is no rent control in Montgomery County currently. However, if the notice that you received is faulty, meaning it is missing some of that required information, please submit a complaint to our office. Our office is the enforcement authority in this county to compel a landlord to reissue the proper notice in accordance with the law. So if in the email address that I included at the top of this chat, and I'll restate it when I'm finished speaking, I'll include the link to the complaint process. If you have questions about that, you kind of want to see how does that work. And I will also reiterate and restate how to speak to a staff member here. There also Landlord Tenant Affairs has investigators that are on duty every day to return phone calls that come to us from MC311. To return the emails that come to us through our inbox, which is the address that I put in the chat, as well as to handle walk-in. The information, whether you come into our office or call our office or send us an email, is going to be the same. There's always a real human body behind the response that you're getting. It's not an automated, like, thank you for reaching out to Landlord Tenant Affairs. Here's a link, have a good day. You can ask us a specific question. We will do our best to answer that based on the information you give us. So I just kind of wanted to keep the focus in the rent increase realm, as opposed to going to everything that we do, but our handbook is there. I will also put all of this in the chat. I do encourage tenants to read their lease. Most of what I do is explaining to tenants what is in their lease because they haven't read it. It's important to fully understand what it is you're signing and what it is you're agreeing to and what the consequences are if you fail to do so. But also, what are the consequences for your landlord if they fail to hold up their end of the bargain? Because there are consequences. And then lastly, I will just put this out here. Although I'm not in housing code enforcement, I used to be a county code inspector, so I can speak clearly on this issue. If you have any maintenance issues in your unit, leaky faucet, you're starting to see mold, the ceiling collapsed, the tub doesn't drain properly, the light switches don't work or the outlets don't work, any type of maintenance issue, mice, roaches, anything like that, please notify your landlord in writing. That is the best way to do it. Keep a record of every time you notify your landlord there's a problem. And if your landlord fails to hold up their obligation, which is to promptly and thoroughly address any maintenance concern, please call Housing Code Enforcement, which is also the same phone number where you can reach Landlord-Tenant Affairs. The county inspectors are tasked with enforcing that part of the code and mandating that landlords make repairs. Depending on the type of repair will determine how long a landlord is given to make those repairs. That information is also in our handbook, but I will include that specifically there since I know that's also a large issue. So with that, I'm going to step off the stage, this virtual stage. And again, I will put everything that I've discussed in the chat and the best way to reach myself or any staff in our office. And if you have any questions, again, hold them to the end if you want to ask them live, or if you would like to send me a message in the chat or to the group, feel free to do so. Halima, I will send it back to you.
Thank you, Valerie. We'll have question and answers again in the end, but if you have any questions now, you can also put them in the chat. I'm going to invite Rudy to share some of the responses that we've gotten in the chat before our next speaker.
Hi, I'm Rudy Jung. I'm Director of Programs at MCAEL, and we had some questions at the beginning to see if people had heard of particular concerns their learners were expressing to them. And just to read a couple of these. Carol from Muslim Community Centers says 2 of my learners are unable to pay their rent. And certainly some of the things that Valerie mentioned are some of the things that perhaps they could you could explore with your learners. Stephanie from Francophone Africans Alliances says, we have heard from learners the lack of clarity about the resources available to assist in the case of eviction. Is there a directory to use as reference? If yes, is it available in multiple languages? So whoever is going to address eviction, perhaps you can answer that in the course of your presentation. And then also from Uni at the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, we get many calls from people who cannot afford their rent but have nowhere to go because it is so difficult to find affordable housing. It's a challenge to provide info on resources that can help in the long term.
Great, thank you, Rudy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do see some folks in the room, so to speak, who are also aware of other resources or would like to share resources towards the question and answer portion of this meeting. If we do have the time, I would invite you to just come on and share, but you could also utilize the chat. And with that, I'm going to invite our next speaker, Tino, with the Montgomery County Racial Equity Network.
Hi, everybody. This is Tino, pronouns he, him, and tell you a little bit about Montgomery County Racial Equity Network, otherwise known as MORE. You might see our logo on a variety of things. A lot of advocacy work has been done over the last 3-4 years by MORE. And we are a coalition-esque group of folks. We have more than just housing work that we do, but we focused on housing a lot over the last 3 years, especially due to COVID. And in our coalition are folks like CASA, Housing Initiative Partnership, JUFJ, Poor People's Campaign, Everyday Canvassing, Francophone Africans Alliance, Impact Silver Spring, Young People for Progress. There are a number of those folks right here today representing those orgs. And we were formed in 2019 to organize and advocate for the successful passage of Bill 2719, which was the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. Today, we've been advocating for a variety of things, including during the pandemic, extended rent relief, making sure that now, currently on rent stabilization is one of our large issues, permanent and temporary, and quality of housing as well, which Valerie just touched on a little bit earlier. Some of that work is door to door. Some of that work is building partnerships between our organizations. Some of that work is your lobbying and traditional advocacy, where you're sitting down with council members, bringing folks to the table who are not included or generally a part of those conversations. A lot of our directly impacted residents, a lot of whom y'all serve, your language learners. And I'll talk about a little bit about some of the specific things, and Valerie touched on this earlier, and y'all also asked questions around this. We've been seeing, huge rent increases, displacing rent increases, the rent increases that are causing folks to move from White Oak, from Germantown, from Gaithersburg, from Silver Spring, to outside of our county, and in some cases have led them to homelessness, temporary or permanent. Quality of housing has been a huge thing for us as well. At the same time, we're having conversations at the door, in the street, with folks who are serving as clients, helping them get things like rent relief or getting connected to some of y'all lovely language learning programs. We're also learning that they have incredible debts owed to their landlords, and sometimes that process is slow to go through as well. So we've started advocating for all of the variety of renter issues in that. One of the things we've seen is that rents have gone up. There's even cases where we've seen them go up 92%. There are lots of buildings that have really massive amounts of code violations, and at the same time, people are experiencing huge rent increases. I'll name a building in specific is Fairland Crossing, which is in the Briggs-Cheney, Fairland area. It's about a 600-unit building, and they've been experiencing reported increases over 10%, some up to 20%, maybe even a 30% there, but somewhere between that range. They've experienced more than one, and we're interacting with a lot of those tenants to organize around rent stabilization. We think as sharing those stories as a coalition, we have been making progress with some of the incoming representatives to see rent stabilization permanently so that renters feel less pressure to be displaced. During the pandemic, that really, I think, kind of changed our whole marketplace. Before, we weren't seeing nearly as many incredible rent increases, and now all of a sudden landlords are justifying it one to the next by saying, oh yeah, well, the market is such, the market is this way, and they're seeing rent increases that are just exorbitant. And a lot of landlords, frankly, don't seem to care too much about high vacancy rates either. And so we've seen in places like Fairland Crossing, there's immense vacancy and also immense code enforcement issues, and also these incredible increases at the same time. Of course, there are other buildings that are experiencing big rent increases and really don't want a lot of vacancies, but they're able to make a profit a lot of times anyways, even if they have high vacancies and have massive amounts of even if they have high vacancies and have really high rents at the same time. So that's kind of where we're at right now. This rent stabilization bill is our big thing. But of course, like I said, renter conditions is huge too for us. And we do advertise a lot of the resources that Valerie talked about for folks to report to their report to OLTA, for folks to get help negotiating on their rents, and things like that. The bill today for rent stabilization is loosely based on Tacoma Park's bill, which is way old, but has served as a model for a lot of our work, as well as a revision of Will Jawando's bill, Councilmember Will Jawando, who put forth one last year. There's also a greater emphasis, we think, that needs to be placed on better code enforcement and just cause evictions. Just cause evictions is the idea that there has to be a reason for somebody not to get a renewal of lease, a reason for somebody to be kicked out of their home at the end of a year. And that is a state level piece of legislation. It's not something that is so easily changed here on the county level. We have to change it at the state first. And that's also something we're looking towards as a coalition, because it actually makes it hard for renters to speak about their conditions when they're worried that they will be retaliated against. And we've also seen and fought examples of where people have reported to code enforcement and within a day have gotten a non-renewal of lease way before their 3-month period, needing that. Some of those have been successfully fought. In that case that I'm thinking about right now, that was actually at Fairland Crossing and it was successfully fought. But we also think that's an important piece of the puzzle, because renters we are organizing with who are experiencing these high increases are consistently worried that they will be displaced because they'll get a non-renewal of lease at the end of their term for organizing, for speaking out about their concerns and issues. And I think we actually see that in some of our complaint processes where there aren't that many complaints happening, because sometimes people have to get over that hump. They need somebody to assist them and say, it's okay to complain, like we've got your back as well. I know OLTA, I know Office of Landlord Tenant Affairs serves that role. A lot of organizations in our coalition serve that role as well. But that's probably something y'all will hear eventually, if not heard already, that, you know, folks are afraid because they might experience something or another from their landlords not renewing their lease. And how we're doing all this, if you have residents that you're working with that are experiencing and have stories about the rent increases, displacement from their homes, worried about not being able to make rent or provide other things for their family like food, there's a great academic piece, anthropological piece called The Rent Eats First. And I know some of y'all truly have experienced that, where the rent is the first thing that you pay off, even before sometimes you get food. And some of our great organizations here providing food like Manna, like Kingdom Fellowship, a lot of the food hubs, Impact Silver Spring have been really crucial in making sure that even if the rent eats first, people have assistance. Oh, check that out. We have a Rent Eats First in the chat. Thank you, Alima. That there are still needs met in through other service providing organizations. We are, one way that we could use help is, you know, collecting more of these stories. We can support folks in sharing them. We think we can get rent stabilization passed. We're at a historic opportunity where 4 out of 11 council members already support rent stabilization. And we rarely have that kind of support going into passing a bill. You know, it takes a lot more whipping votes and a lot more folks to get, or not a lot more folks, but we usually have fewer allies in the fight at the beginning. So we think there's a real possibility that in 2023, many folks don't experience the displacing rates of 7%, of 10%, of 20%, of 30% to their rents, and they have a more stable, predictable, stable rent throughout the time that they stay there. And hopefully we see longer stays in our community as well, and our renters become less transient in Montgomery County, such as the renters in Tacoma Park, where we have knocked firsthand and seen the difference between renters on Castle Boulevard and at Hampton Point in Germantown, or at the Hamptons in Germantown, and the difference between renters, low-income renters to moderate-income renters in Tacoma Park in rent-stabilized units. One way that y'all can help is you could volunteer. You could door knock with us. You could send us folks that that feel like they have a story to tell and you know, would be supportive of something like rent stabilization. You could send us people who would not be supportive. We're happy to talk to them anyway. Our work, especially my work as everyday canvassing, is to knock doors and talk to folks on streets. And I'm very happy to talk to anybody about their experience and introduce them to folks who support their work and would want to join them in whatever fight they're going through, regardless of whether we've talked about it here today around rent or around something else they're experiencing around their living situation. Translating flyers is also helpful. There's so many languages here, so many languages in Montgomery County. I know right now we're working on a project where we're speaking Korean, Mandarin, English, Spanish, and French, and then some smaller in population who speak it languages from West Africa as well. So translation can always be helpful, especially if you can pinpoint a community that has a lot of folks that speak a similar language. We'd love to be there and make sure that they can have support and join in our work. And we have volunteer capacity in a lot of languages, but definitely not enough. We could always have more, speaking a variety of the languages that our residents and our language learners call home here in Montgomery County. That is my short. I see a thing by Valerie, marketplace tool. That seems pretty cool. I'm going to hand it back over to Halima. And if anybody has questions for me at the end, I'll be around. Yeah, thank y'all so much.
Great. Thank you, Tina. And again, you can post your questions in the chat. We'll have time in the end as well. I'm going to invite our next speaker, Captain Juan, with the Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Captain Juan Portillo with the Sheriff's Office. I'm currently the Division Commander for the Civil and Criminal sections of the Sheriff's Office, which includes child support enforcement, the criminal section, attachments, civil, and of course, evictions. My presentation is a little bit different in that some would tell you that we actually cause homelessness in Montgomery County, which is unfortunate, but we are in essence, the law enforcement arm of the courts in Montgomery County. So we are tasked with carrying out the court orders. Really, the first involvement of the sheriff's office in the eviction process is after the landlord has applied for the failure to pay rent notice. That, in essence, is a summons for the tenant to appear in court. Once they're in court, if the landlord wins, judgment is awarded to them by a judge, then the landlord comes back a couple days later, 48 hours, I believe it is now, and can apply for a warrant of restitution. And that warrant of restitution is what gives us the authority to evict a family from the residence. Currently, because of the pandemic, the last 3 years at this point, the numbers are a little bit skewed, I may say. We've had a huge drop in the last 3 years just because of the moratorium on evictions and rent increases and everything that goes along with it. But using fiscal year 19 numbers, we actually receive about 75,000 individual court documents at the sheriff's office. Out of those documents, about 60,000 of them end up being a landlord-tenant related, if you will. That includes the eviction notices, and it includes the failure to pay rent notices, and it also includes the tenant holding over suits, as well as their breach of lease suits. So it's very, very, very many documents. We are extremely busy. Now, of course, the pandemic caused a huge slowdown on that. So the numbers for fiscal years 2021 and 22 aren't what they usually are. Now, having said all of that, in the last couple of months, what the district court has done is they've actually doubled their landlord-tenant dispute type cases from 500 to 1,000. So what does that mean for all of us? It means that we're getting more evictions. We are getting more warrants of restitution at the sheriff's office, and then the landlords are calling, and we're scheduling a really very large number of evictions. I can tell that historically we've scheduled about 200 per month. Last month we scheduled 343, and I can tell you that as of this morning, in November, we've scheduled 133 already. So we are getting a large scale number of evictions. Also, I can tell you that historically, we actually only end up evicting about 8% of those that start off with a failure to pay rent notices and the warrants of restitution. How does the number decrease so much? People pay the rent, of course, people move out, or people come up with other agreements with their landlords. So there's different and varied avenues by which people or folks, families are able to kind of avoid the eviction. Beginning October 1, we also have a new state legislation. I believe it's House Bill 18. So when the sheriff's office receives a figure, and I'm going back and forth because it's not a linear process, if you will. It's kind of has different branches to it. So when the sheriff's office initially receives a failure to pay rent notice, which is a summons, there's 4 pieces of paper attached to each other. So 2 are posted on the door, 1 is for our records, and 1 is actually mailed to the tenant. So on top of the fact that we make these notifications, when we post them, there's a brand new document, and I don't know if you guys can see it. I didn't think of this before. There's an additional document that is also placed within the envelope that's mailed to the tenant, and then the failure to pay notice that is posted on their door has a copy of this document. Now, it's in English, but if you look at the back, there are QR codes for Spanish and other languages. So this is a brand new process. It's mandated by state legislation that's just been recently enacted October 1. So it's also an additional piece of information that tenants get. So from our perspective, and I know my perspective would probably differ from most of you. From our perspective, they do have a lot of notice. On top of the fact that they have this and the mailings and the postings, once the eviction is scheduled, we also post them once again, letting them know, folks, the eviction is imminent, and that gives them further information. So there are many avenues by which they're getting information. So what you guys are doing is basically rounding out that information, which is good. We don't want to evict anybody, but we also understand that it's a business model for the landlords, right? So we understand that they have a business to run, but we also understand that families need and require a place to live. we do what the best we can, but at the end of the day, we have to follow the court order, and that court order is the warrant of restitution. We are, in essence, the middleman. We currently work with HHS, and we provide them as much information as possible to make sure and ensure that these tenants are getting the resources available throughout Montgomery County so that we can avoid evictions. Again, October, we scheduled 343 evictions, but we actually only completed 79. So really, although we schedule many, we don't actually complete or evict or execute that many evictions when it turns out, when you really narrow down all the numbers. But again, 79 families being evicted last month, it's still a large number. They have to be housed elsewhere. So I'm sure this is where you folks come in. Our role in all this, of course, is really at the end of the day, making sure that the court order is executed if it has to be. I know that Halima is very generous in providing 15 minutes for me, but I don't believe that I need 15 minutes. And I am very familiar with the entire process. I've been doing this in the evictions for about 15 years. So from my end, I've seen it. I've seen a lot of it. So I'll be able to answer any questions and all your questions. I also put my number on the chat, so anybody would call me directly. I can answer any questions. If some people feel uncomfortable asking that in such an open forum, I'll absolutely entertain any questions via phone or even email. Thank you, Halim. I think that's all I have at this point.
Thank you, Captain. And I also want to thank you once more for honoring my request sort of at last minute. When I was planning this meeting, the sheriff's office was not what I was thinking about. It was more so resources. But then I've had my own experiences and I was like, what does this process look like? So it was a very last minute request. And I thank your office for making the time.
No problem. We understand that we're a large component of this whole process. So no, we gladly help as best as we can. Thank you for having us.
Of course, you're welcome. So next up, we're going to have Carmen and Cecil.
Thank you, Halima. My name is Carmen Castro Conroy. I'm the manager and certified housing counselor for Housing Initiative Partnership. We go by the initials HIP. And I do have a PowerPoint that I would like to share and tell you a little bit about who we are. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Okay, let me go to share the screen. Is it better? Can you see it now?
I think it's coming through. Yes.
Great. So I want to focus on our rental counseling program. We HIP. It's a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, and we serve all of Montgomery County and Prince George County. Okay, just move the slide. You can see it, right? So we've been serving Maryland residents for the last 30 years plus. We started as a affordable housing developer in Prince George County and opened our offices in Montgomery County during the foreclosure crisis in 2008. And we have expanded our housing counseling program to include pre-purchase counseling, foreclosure prevention, post-purchase for homeowners, rental counseling, and financial capability. The last couple of years, we have also added a couple other programs, including home sharing, and I'll tell you what that program is all about, and our financial empowerment center with the city of Gaithersburg. We have been also very pleased to expand our capacity and our staffing to include other initiatives, and Cecil will tell you a little more about that through our tenant outreach program. So I'll tell you a little bit of how we serve clients through our rental counseling program. So our rental counseling services started in 2015, and it's part of the HUD-approved curriculum where we serve tenants or anyone who is looking for affordable housing. So we try to connect them with any type of resources that may be available in regards to like rental assistance or subsidies, but also our goal is to help them maintain their current rental housing situation. So if they're at risk of facing eviction, we're also going to be connecting them to the programs that may help them avoid the eviction, usually through the Department of Health and Human Services, but also through small local organizations that provide rental assistance as well. So as part of our program, we help our clients apply for affordable housing if, for instance, they're not familiar with the HOC portal. That's one of the services that we provide, and we help our clients sign up and go on the waiting list. Or if they are granted a voucher, we also help them with the application process and collect all the documentation to meet with the HOC caseworkers. If they need help with their budgets or credit issues, we also have the capacity to pull credit reports and look at their reports and review it with them and see if there are any mistakes or any accounts that need their attention, and can also negotiate payment plans with their creditors. We also educate our clients about renters' rights and responsibilities, and when appropriate, we direct them to contact the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. And if there are any issues that cannot be resolved, they can also file complaints for investigators to look into. But in overall, we also manage expectations. And when I say that, it's just because we all know that Montgomery County is just very expensive county in regards to housing. I was just looking at reports. This is a tool that we use to compare counties and states when people may have some flexibility for moving to other areas. And the fair market rent that comes up for Montgomery County, it's for a 2-bedroom apartment is $1,785. So that's affordable for a household that makes $71,000 a year. So all our clients, for the most part, are in the 30% area median income, and the 30 to 50% of area median income. So that's way below that 71,000. And when we talk about affordable housing, the idea is that a household would not spend more than 30% of their income towards rent. But in reality, for households that make less than what's the annual income needed to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, they're spending more than 50%, sometimes 60, 70% of their incomes towards rent. And we know that that creates a situation where they put themselves at risk, because if anything happens that was not planned, any unexpected expenses or temporary loss of income, that puts this household directly at risk of eviction. So we have a lot of work to do. What I just described was the rental counseling program that we started before the pandemic. But as we all know, the pandemic created additional difficulties for our families. So we had to very quickly adapt to some of the changes and working and serving our clients remotely. So with the support of Montgomery County and through grants, we became one of the support organizations to help clients apply for rental assistance programs that were created during the pandemic. And many of the challenges that our clients face when applying for those rental assistance programs had to do with access. Our clients many times didn't have the technology that was required in order to submit an application online using a platform, scanning documents, uploading. They just didn't have the technology or the know-how to. So in order to help serve those clients that face those barriers, we made accommodations in allowing them to come to our office and bring the documents so that we would scan the documents and upload them in the portal and submitted the applications on their behalf. So we've been doing that kind of service for tenants who were at risk of eviction that got behind paying the rent. Up until this moment, the Department of Health and Human Services is still taking applications for phase 4 of the COVID rent relief program. And we have helped many clients apply for that program, and some of them are waiting to hear back. But currently the criteria to apply for that particular program is that tenants show that they owe at least 2 months of rent as of June 30th. So if you have anyone that comes to you and is requesting assistance with rent, the COVID rent relief program is still open. They can do this directly and go to the portal and submit an application, but they can always contact our office and we can provide that assistance for them. So in addition to providing additional resources to our clients and serving them in person, by phone, and through virtual appointments, we have also increased our capacity and train our staff in using all of the technology to serve clients that in the past we were more in-person agency. All of our services were done from our offices. We're housed at the Up County Regional Service Center in Germantown, and we also have a satellite office in Gatesburg, and our main offices are also located in Hyattsville. So we train our staff in serving clients remotely, like I said, and also started a partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services on a program called Home Share. This is separate from what we've done in the past. It was a grant that we applied for and were approved. This was even prior to the pandemic, the beginning of 2020. We were embarked to launch this program and were challenged during the pandemic with all the lockouts and the access that was very limited back then. But we started to work on this program, and what it is, basically, it's a way to match homeowners with home seekers. So we've been successful in creating matches where we get contacted by homeowners who may have space in their homes. All they need is to have like an empty room that can serve as a bedroom, and if they have interest in renting that out to a single adult, they contact our number and we make that connection. So we do it in a very safe manner where we screen home seekers and homeowners as well. We do home visits to interview them and explain how the program works. And after the match, we provide support. So that's a program that's helped some older homeowners age in place and find ways to supplement their income that many times could be very limited. And also it has helped home seekers find affordable housing. So I'm going to share my contact information at the end. So if you know of anyone that may have interest in participating in home sharing, we'll be happy to either do a presentation or work with your clients directly. Now I'm gonna let Cecil cover the next 3 slides. He's gonna talk about all our outreach efforts that started during the pandemic.
Thank you, Carmen. Could you make the PowerPoint full screen? Because I know the next slide is going to be a little bit confusing, and even
Sure.
if we use Sheriff Portillo's time. I want people to be able to scan it on their own so they can get a better sense if I have to skip over certain things. So my name is Cecil Millen. I work with Housing Initiative Partnership as a tenant outreach specialist. Tenant outreach is very vague, but essentially it comes down to these main things. This is what I do. The most important thing that I do is my presence in landlord-tenant court. And I am in the courthouse every Wednesday and every Friday, except for this Wednesday, because I have a bit of a cough and didn't want to interact with 200 tenants, possibly getting people sick. But I will go to court, and every single morning on Wednesday, there is a docket with 500 tenants being sued for failure to pay rent. Not all of them are going to show up. Usually it's between 10 and 20% of people who are sued actually go to court. But if you do the quick math, that's 50 to 100 people in the morning, and then another 50 to 100 people in the afternoon. So that is a lot of clients, and not just any clients, but a lot of people who are certainly among the most urgent and high priority cases in the county. So I do outreach in the courts on Wednesday and Friday. I go to apartment communities and do presentations. I speak to tenant associations and tenant organizations. We'll get into that a little bit more on the next slide, and work with certain property managers in order to quickly relocate people. And with the help of Sheriff Portillo and the list of scheduled evictions, I do door-to-door outreach at apartment complexes that are scheduled for eviction. So that's me getting a list of 25 addresses, going door to door, knocking on the door saying, hello, have you received this? Do you have a plan? And if they don't have a plan, can we help you make a plan? You do have a plan. Well, have you heard about this program that will help you? That sort of thing. All right, next slide, Carmen.
Let me see. It's not letting me go to the next one here. Let's see.
Okay, let's try again. There we go.
Good.
Okay, so another pretty massive aspect of my job is when I ask people if they have a plan or have you heard of these programs, I have to know the programs. I have to be, I have to know who I can refer people to and which programs people will qualify for. And so this is just a quick overview of the relationships that that I find to be the most useful when I'm working with clients. These are the referrals that I make based on the answers that they give me to the direct questions I ask. I will make these types of referrals, right? So if I'm in the courthouse and someone says that their case is a little bit strange, or if I look at it and I say, that's not right? Like, no, that's weird. That's strange. They shouldn't have done that. Sometimes landlords are just not so good at math, and I can refer them to these free legal organizations that are in court every week. I have a working relationship with county caseworkers and case managers, so that when someone says, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to get evicted in 3 weeks and I haven't heard back from my COVID rent relief case, I can say, I will, let's talk to a caseworker and let's get you prioritized so that the check can come before the sheriff does, so that you can get back on your feet. You can get that head start you need. Again, referring people to for rehousing, especially people who are in subsidized housing, perhaps senior living. I also, we make referrals to other organizations in the county that can help people. So we're in Up County. If someone's in Silver Spring, right next to the Latino Economic Development Center, we'll send people there, and they'll send people our way for if just whatever works best for the tenants, and that creates flexibility in greater geographical coverage for us to reach them as quickly as possible. And we also work with many other organizations such as Renters Alliance, for example, ULTA, city officials, council members, and the sheriff, who's kind enough to does not provide. Okay. Next slide, Carmen.
Let me try and see. Let me see. Okay.
Okay. And we also host information sessions once a week. This is the agenda that we cover in the information session. But I think the most important thing is saying you have rights, here they are. And if you're going through the process of eviction, first step, second step, third step, fourth step, all the way here with a timeline attached. That's super important. And then also leaving a lot of space at the end for question and answer so that tenants can ask us, well, in my situation, or my neighbor or my family member is dealing with this, what can I do directly to benefit my cause? And that is the general, that's the gist of what we do. So thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you so much. Carmen, can we stop sharing the screen, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Stop share. Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've seen some questions come through the chat. We're going to start the question and answer portion of this meeting. Rudy, if you could please share some of the questions that we have in the chat. Thank you.
Sure. Just want to make sure that we address ones in the that were asked earlier in the chat. I know that Stephanie had asked about a directory that of information to assist in case of eviction, and I know that Valerie, you had posted a. Do you want to talk a little bit about that brochure on eviction and whether it's available in other languages?
Sure, yeah, and so everything on our website that is not an uploaded PDF can be translated into any of the languages that Google has. That information just on any of our pages, scroll down to the very bottom right corner and look and select whatever your language preference is. But specifically, the eviction prevention brochure that our office issues is available in English and in Spanish. In the PDF form, but it does give a general overview of the eviction process. It does say eviction prevention. It will step-by-step tell a landlord how to evict a tenant, but it also tells a tenant how to avoid getting evicted. But also, if they are in that process, it will help outline where exactly they are in the process and what options they may have. It does have some resources in the back of it where your resident could try to connect with. Either getting additional assistance, I would definitely refer them to legal aid or to the Maryland self-help section. And it does kind of depend on the individual issue where our office staff may direct someone. So we would also encourage residents who are in eviction proceedings to give us a call, and if we need to connect them with HIP or CASA or whomever, we are definitely happy and willing to do that. I also did include the rent. I just had the rental marketplace tool that we have. It is a tool that's newer this year. I forget what the month was where it came out, but it came out this year. And it allows for residents to be able to search, filter out the type of housing, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, whatever it may be, and see what the rental rates are for that particular community. We do encourage residents, once they see a unit or a community they like, contact the community directly to confirm the current rent rate. Some of these are market rate, which means they fluctuate with the market. So it's a good tool to help kind of start. If they're looking for a particular area, it'll give them an idea of what the rent rates are doing in that area. And we also, when a tenant does make contact with a landlord at a multifamily, we encourage them to ask, do you have any tax credit programs? Are you running any specials? Are there any discounts for educators or police, fire, military, or low income? These are things that there are programs that they don't openly advertise for, but if you ask the question, might be there. So it's definitely, we encourage residents to do that as well. Thank you.
Would any of our other speakers like to talk about any other the directory kind of resources that you might have? Okay, maybe I can ask a question of my own. I know Cecil was mentioning the information sessions, and that's available in English and Spanish. Perhaps you could provide more information on when and how people can access those.
Great question. It's usually the link is posted on the county website. We also have a calendar on the front page of our website with a link to all the activities. You can click on the day. We do it Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock. We found that usually is it's best to let people who work 9 to 5 get home, make dinner for the kids, and then they can turn on around 7 o'clock. We try to do 30 minutes of PowerPoint and then leave 30 minutes for questions at the end. We do it usually alternating English, Spanish. So last night we did English. Next Tuesday we'll do Spanish. And we email out to like 500 people every week. We have a big email list, updates on what we're going to cover. And if anybody would like to forward that to their clients, I'd be happy to add you to that list so that you can receive our emails and forward them to the people that you have who would benefit.
And have you received requests for other languages, or how do you handle that?
We have not. We do have a lot of people who are English second language, and so sometimes things will we're just very open to saying, you know, if there is a question, we'll repeat anything, and we also do have language lines. So in terms of our ability to do counseling to non-English Spanish language tenants, we are able to do that. But in terms of hosting a separate information session in another language in the county, that's not something that we have really looked into. Although if you think that there is a significant need for a specific language, we'd be happy to look into how we could do that.
Okay, great. And just to confirm, so these information sessions are all done online?
Virtually, yes.
Okay.
Hey, Rudy. I just wanted to add as well, if a resident contacts our office, they can contact our office at the number I provided. I'll put it in the chat again, and request whatever their preferred language is. Not necessarily just English. It's not limited to English and Spanish, but there's a whole host of languages. So they just have to they have to ask, and we'll contact them back with something to capture.
Great to know. Thank you. And then Captain Juan, there's a question for you in terms of that brochure that you were showing. There's a question about how to access that publication.
Yeah, I texted a copy of it to Halima. I'm hoping she's able to publish it for everybody to view. It's probably the easiest way of doing it. But no, thank you for the question. She has it.
It's in the chat. The link is in the chat directly to the pamphlet that we saw. And there's also another link in there. If you go to the bottom, you'll see one that has several languages. And
every person who is posted with the failure to pay rent notice will get this physical pamphlet as part of the packet that we're dropping off at the individual residents.
Great. Then there's another question from Uni, and maybe you've answered this already. I'm sorry, I'm not kept up with this, but I can read it. Is there a way for families to know when exactly an eviction is scheduled and someone from the sheriff's office will be coming to evict them?
Okay, the straight answer is no. We will not share that information with the tenant, and there's a variety of reasons for it. And the most important one for us is safety. Just so that you know, historically, and in Montgomery County, we have actually had people take shots at us. We had a tenant come out of the house, walk back in, and light himself on fire. We've had the threat, if you come to my house on this date, we'll be waiting for you guys. So no, it's a security measure. We will not provide that information to anybody.
Thank you. And then I note that Uni has also put in the chat that Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center also has a new website with resources on housing. And the link is there.
If this is Captain Portillo again, just one quick comment for everybody. Just as a message for all of your clients and wherever they are. The important thing for all of them to know is that the only person who can evict you from your residence is the sheriff. The sheriff's office is the only entity, the only agency who has the authority of evicting anybody from their house. If your landlord tells you that they're going to evict you, that is not a legal eviction, if you will. What are the recourses? Really, from our perspective, there's not much we can do about it. That's up to the and in most cases for the landlord to determine whether or not they're willing to face the liability of self-help evicting somebody, but they're not, technically not legal evictions. It's only the sheriff's office that's able to carry them out.
And that does bring up a good point regarding self-help eviction. That is essentially like what Captain Portillo was saying. It's when a landlord unlawfully attempts or actually successfully retakes possession of that property. So meaning the landlord changes the locks or they remove your belongings without using the legal eviction process and having that court order in the presence of the Montgomery County Sheriff. If a landlord does attempt to evict a resident without going through that proper procedure, or if a resident feels threatened, they can call the non-emergency number for MPD and seek assistance. All evictions, again, are only done with a court order after a judgment in the presence of the sheriff. The resident is entitled to due process, whether they're in the wrong or not. And we also encourage residents to document the landlord if they do take that action. So take pictures of their belongings in their home. Any cost that the tenant incurs as a result of an illegal eviction or a self-help eviction, the landlord may be liable for that within district court, and the tenant can sue their landlord, and we have that tenant sue landlords who have done that. Although our office cannot physically prevent someone from doing that, we will give guidance to residents in that situation and do encourage them to call MPD in that moment.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to invite Uni to come and share the Gilchrist has a new website, and it does have a lot of resources on there, including help for housing. So I'll invite you to come on and share with us for about 5 minutes, and then we'll get back to the question and answers.
Sure. So I had a couple more questions, so I'm happy to share the website, and then I'll probably jump on with a couple more questions unless you think I should ask them now. Just show the website now?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, thank you again for this opportunity. My name is Uni Hong. I'm a program manager with the Gilchrist Immigrant Resource Center, as Halima said. And so we have created a new website. I'm just going to spend a few minutes sharing some of the main features with you all here. This is the home page. And a lot of folks come to us for our classes initially. And so we have English, basic computers, and citizenship preparation. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the classes page. All of you are pretty familiar with ESOL classes, I'm sure. But I just wanted to show you that in addition to our classes, and we do encourage people to sign up for updates. Winter session is going to be coming soon. And so if you would sign up, have your folks sign up for updates, you'll be notified ahead of time, or your students will, about any new classes that are going to be opening up. But we have a list of other online learning resources, as well as another list of other places to take English classes, and also a list of the MCAEL directory here. So anybody who's interested in various learning opportunities are encouraged to come onto the website, not only for our classes, but for any other classes that are happening in the county. So I just wanted to skip really quickly to the Get Help section, which is going to be probably the most helpful for your purposes in terms of the things we're talking about. And so this Get Help section includes resources not only on county programs, but on nonprofit resources, as well as other general resources nationally, as well as some of the other municipalities here. But if I want to just show you, if you go to each of these categories, and it's all broken down, as you can see, some of them have subcategories. And so in our housing section, We pretty much have almost all of the resources that people have been talking about are here. And I just want to give a kudos to DHCA because their website, the one in particular, this avoiding eviction one, is really, really great. We share this with a lot of people. It's in English and Spanish, and pretty much everything that people need for the most part is here in terms of legal and what to do if you get a court summons, and flyers in the different languages. So we have this link all over the various housing pages in our Get Help section because there's so much great information on there. But in terms of for renters, so we have that link, but then we also have the different language flyers here. We have the OLTA, anyone who's faced discrimination as well. And then pretty much we lifted this and thought it was so important to provide, again, these separate links from the DHCA website, and HIP is here, LADC, Renters Alliance, and CASA. So we just wanted to make sure that everyone had access to that. And then in terms of affordable housing, all the things that folks have talked about, the home sharing program that HIP, at HIP, as well as the rental marketplace, and HOC, other search engines, as well as some of the county programs for affordable housing. So that's just an example. Homeowner resources, HIP is also featured here, as well. So great job, Carmen, and all the great work that you do. So this is just an example of some of the things you can find on the website. Legal, broken down by category again. We have a lot of different resources. Immigration, also, I'm just going to give you a quick spin on our immigrant resources. Information on Know Your Rights, immigration legal services. This is a real crisis as well in terms of folks who need legal representation, and it's a real challenge right now. But there's a chart where you can search by type of case if someone has an asylum case, for example, and a number of nonprofits. Capacity is a real issue at a lot of these nonprofits, but the information is there, as well as information on how to find a reputable private attorney if someone has a issue with USCIS or Immigration Court or ICE. And so there's just a ton of information here, a lot of concern that immigrants have about getting public benefits. And so educating people about public charge and what they're, possibly can get without having to be concerned about their immigration status in terms of benefits for themselves or their children. There's just a ton of information here in terms of, community education, in addition to just resources, again, on the nonprofit side, as well as on county programs. And in terms of translation, IT is working on getting this tool at the top of the page, but there is, a translation tool down here on the bottom right. I know Google Translate isn't always perfect, but that's what we have right now. And so anybody who needs the website translated can do that here in the bottom right corner. So again, just if you want to see what's happening at any specific site, we have 4 different locations throughout the county for those who are not as familiar with what we do, but we offer information referral services as well as classes, again, like I mentioned, in English, computers, and citizenship. And so you can see kind of all the different things that are happening. I know a lot of you guys are, maybe running ESOL classes, but we have conversation classes that are ongoing online as well as in person, and you can kind of see what's going on at each site by clicking on any of these menu items at the bottom as well. So just wanted to give you a quick spin. Again, I think the biggest resource for you all, most helpful, is going to be this Get Help page, in addition to the Immigrant Resources page. And so please go ahead and use it, get the word out, let us know if you have comments. It is a lot of work trying to keep this website updated, and so we are trying to continue to update things and include things where people think that it's appropriate. And so just please be patient with us, but we are continuing to add resources, and just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of this tool. So thank you so much. I'll stop sharing, and feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well if anyone has questions about any of that. Okay.
Great, thank you
again.
Of course, you're welcome. Rudy, do we have any last questions sort of in the chat?
I think the last one was Eunice, actually.
Yeah, I actually, okay, so Carmen, So you mentioned helping people get onto the HOC wait list, and I know that that's kind of the official affordable housing, like federal subsidized housing, right? But people are on that wait list. I've heard of people 8 years they've been on that wait list and this and that. So of course we tell people about it, and it certainly doesn't hurt to get on it. But I mean, obviously it's not like a quick solution at all, but you feel like it definitely people should still get on it, and it is a worthwhile to do that, even though it's a years-long wait list. So we should still encourage people to do that, right?
And you're right. It's not for the immediate solution to their search for housing, but it's more like down the road. But it also depends on their special circumstances. So for anyone over 60, I highly recommend it because they will be given priority. So anyone with a disability or over 60, we highly encourage them to stay on this waiting list. Now, unfortunately, we know there are about 40,000 people just in Montgomery County waiting for a voucher. And HOC has about 10,000 vouchers that they administer. So the federal government has tried to increase the number of vouchers, but it's still very limited. We still encourage everyone to get their names and also to make sure that they stay on the list, because every 6 months or every year they need to reapply.
When you say reapply, I think, do they reach out to you and say, do you still want to be on the list, and you respond, or do you have to affirmatively do something periodically yourself? I think they reach out to you and you have to respond, right?
Well, it depends. Like it's a portal on the HOC website, so it's all done through this portal, and everyone provides their personal cell phone number and email address, and that's how everyone will get a notice if there is a voucher available or if it's time to update their information on the portal.
Okay, so they'll get notification if they need to do something, right? Okay, great. And then I had one more question for Carmen. Just so the COVID rent relief program, I know that it's still running and you can still apply. But when you say, and I just learned this recently and was kind of surprised because I was reading the requirement differently. When they say you have to be 2 months behind on rent as of June 30th, I just figured as of June 30th, there was a requirement that you be 2 months behind on rent. So as long as you're 2 months behind, you can apply. But we were told by HHS, as of June 30th, you had to have been 2 months behind. So as of today, you have to be like 6 months behind in order to qualify. So it's not like if you're 2 months behind now, you can apply. We were told as of June 30th, that was 2. So that's July, August, September, October, November. So that's like 7 months behind at this point to qualify for COVID rent relief.
You were not
correct?
the only one confused.
Yeah, I was shocked. So at this point, I mean, if you're 7 months behind rent, you're lucky if you haven't already been evicted. But that is correct, right?
That is not correct. It's partially correct. Sorry, Carmen.
Yeah. I'll try to explain, and Cecil, please step in if I'm not clear enough, because it is confusing. So when the portal opened May 16th of this year, it closed on June 30th. And that the requirement was that anyone who applied had to be at least 2 months behind. Then the county reopened the portal at the end of July and it's still reopened, but they didn't change that criteria of showing 2 months of rent due as of June 30th. So in order to submit your application, you have to submit a copy of a rent ledger that provides the balance. And they are going to ask everyone that's being reviewed to provide another copy of the rent ledger. So for those who have applied, let's say back in May and June, they will have to show that back in May and June, they owe at least 2 months of rent. And that as of, let's say, November 9th, they still owe 2 months of rent, even if they made partial payments or payments after June 30th. But who is not eligible is someone who owes 2 months of rent after June 30th. Let's say they were current through July and they got behind in August and September, and they're thinking that they have the 2 month criteria, unfortunately, they would not be considered for this program because they were not behind by June 30th. So it's a little confusing, and it has taken us time even to process this information and also explain it to our clients, because we're still getting calls from people that either criteria they may not meet. One exception the county made is that if they didn't owe 2 full months of rent by June 30th, but they were very close to almost 2 months rent, they would make exceptions if the amount was very close to 100% of the 2 months rent. Cecil, if I was not clear, please.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
It is, this is, I mean, the very fact that it's so hard to explain is why there's so much confusion. Basically, you needed to, when July 1st came around, you needed to still owe May and still owe June, and you need to still be behind at least 2 months by the time they actually process your application. So if you applied June 30th and you owed all of May, all of June, and you're, let's say that you've paid, you maybe got your job back, but you're still, now you owe November and October, you would still qualify, just as long as you are still 2 months behind now and were 2 months behind at the moment that you applied, assuming that was during, the May, June period. And I'm not surprised that you heard a little bit of confusion about this, because I know for a fact that there were people working as caseworkers at the county who were unclear about the exact qualifications because the wording of it is so confusing. So if you speak to somebody who was denied because they no longer owe May and June, but they are still more than 2 months behind, they were improperly denied. They were wrongfully denied, and they should appeal that case upwards. And if you want to bring me in on that, I'd be happy to, because I've been banging the drum about the need for an entire Health and Human Services readjustment of understanding of the rules for a while now. And I just don't know how much the correct information is trickling down. So if you do find cases where that is happening and you think that they're incorrect denials because someone did owe May and June, but now they don't, and now they're being denied, that is a prime case of someone who should qualify, but is often being denied in this current situation. And I think that of the 6,000 applications, they've approved 20%. And they've denied 18%. So they're denying almost as many cases as they're approving. And I want to make sure that the denials are correctly denied. So
Thank you. And we do have our speakers who have shared their contact information in the chat. We are going to be sending out a follow-up meeting resource with some of the links that we have in the chat, the contact information, the recording of this video, as well as the presentation that you have seen. I do want to make sure that I honor the time of everybody, because we were supposed to end a few minutes early. But I want to thank everyone for joining us today, especially our speakers. This is a very difficult topic. It's something that's been impacting a lot of people in the county. Like I said, it's also very personal for me. I've been seeing a lot of it in my apartment building. So thank you so much for sharing the resources. I've put a link in the chat. It's a SurveyMonkey just to get your feedback for this meeting. We want to make sure that these meetings are continuously meaningful for you, and they are providing information that you could share with your learners. So please take a couple of minutes to share your feedback on this. This is my last meeting hosting. This is my last day with MCAEL. So I'm sure that one of my colleagues here will send you all the information about this meeting. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us.
Yes, that will be me. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you again to the speakers.
Thank you. Halima, did you see that?
Halima, we're going to miss you.
I'm going to miss you too.
Good.
I'm going to miss you, Halima. Good job.